Welcome to Delta History, where the fog of war clears and the truth comes alive. In the bitter cold of Ukraine's eastern front, the wind sliced through the barren fields like knives. A tense, unnatural silence blanketed the land, the kind that soldiers instinctively recognize as the calm before the storm. Frost clung to the skeletal branches of trees, and the air was so still that even the distant rumble of artillery seemed to have vanished. It was the early hours of the morning, the sky still a deep, cold shade of pre-dawn blue, when Ukrainian reconnaissance drones, gliding high above the frost-covered tree lines, captured images that set off alarms in Kiev. From above, the unmistakable silhouettes of Russian armored columns appeared. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and logistical trucks stretched for kilometers along a muddy supply road. The sheer number of vehicles was staggering. This wasn't a small probing force. It wasn't a convoy delivering fuel or rations. This was the spearhead of what Russian generals believed would be their most decisive offensive of the year, aimed squarely at breaking the Ukrainian lines wide open. The build-up to disaster. For weeks, Ukrainian intelligence analysts had been assembling a puzzle from fragments of information. Satellite imagery had shown fresh tank tracks radiating from staging areas deep behind Russian lines. Intercepted radio chatter hinted at the arrival of new armored units. Supply trains carried ammunition and spare parts to forward bases, and fuel depots were being filled to maximum capacity. Artillery batteries repositioned themselves closer to the front, their barrels trained westward. In occupied towns, civilians reported columns of armored vehicles rumbling through at night, their engines muffled but their sheer weight shaking the ground. The target sector was no mystery. It was a stretch of front that, on the surface, appeared vulnerable. Fewer trenches, fewer reinforced bunkers, and open farmland in between. Moscow believed that with enough force, this sector could be smashed open in a matter of hours. The plan was ambitious. Send in more than 300 armored vehicles, crush Ukrainian defenses with massed artillery, and flood the breach with mechanized infantry before Kiev could respond. By the end of the day, Russian commanders envisioned their flags flying deep behind enemy lines. By first light, the armored spearhead was on the move. T-72B3s, upgraded T-80s, and the prized T-90M tanks, Moscow's so-called invincible machines, rolled forward in tight, confident formations. The rumble of their engines echoed across the frozen plains, and their tracks churned the hardened ground into thick, clinging mud. What the Russians didn't know was that every movement, every formation change, and every pause had been tracked for days. The trap is set. Unknown to the advancing Russian forces, Ukrainian military intelligence had been preparing for this exact moment. Drones equipped with thermal cameras had mapped vehicle concentrations at night, picking up the heat signatures of idling engines. Local partisan networks risked everything to relay convoy routes through occupied villages. Satellite reconnaissance confirmed the direction of movement. At the Ukrainian General Staff headquarters, a decision was made. This would not be a defensive stand at the trench line. Instead, they would let the Russians advance into a carefully chosen kill zone designed to destroy them. The location was perfect. Open farmland flanked by dense tree lines concealing anti-tank units, intersected by dirt roads that became quagmires in the winter thaw. The area had been pre-measured for artillery strikes. Minefields were placed to funnel vehicles into predictable lanes. Observation drones were positioned for maximum coverage. For several days, Ukrainian artillery crews rehearsed their fire missions in secret. HIMARS rocket batteries synchronized with 155mm howitzers. FPV drone operators planned their flight paths. Anti-tank teams memorized their firing sectors. When the time came, the entire battlefield would erupt in a coordinated storm of fire. The first blows, just after sunrise, the first Russian tanks entered the kill zone. Their heavy tracks clattered over the frozen road, exhaust plumes trailing in the cold air. And then, the stillness shattered. From miles away, Ukrainian HIMARS systems launched their rockets in unison. Trails of fire arced high above the battlefield before slamming into the lead and rear sections of the Russian columns. The blasts were devastating. The lead tanks erupted in fireballs, blocking forward movement, while the rear vehicles were obliterated, sealing any escape. Then came the deep, rolling thunder of Ukrainian howitzers. Shell after shell slammed into the convoy, showering dirt, metal, and shrapnel. Fuel trucks burst into towering flames, sending oily black smoke spiraling into the morning sky. From the tree lines, small Ukrainian anti-tank teams emerged from hidden positions. Armed with javelins and NLAWs, they struck immobilized armor with lethal precision. Each missile streaked toward its target, detonating in violent bursts that sent tank turrets flying. Overhead, drones hovered like hawks. Some relayed live targeting data to artillery crews. Others dropped munitions directly onto exposed turrets and engine decks. The Russians were being hit from every direction: front, rear, above, and both flanks. The collapse of the assault. Inside the Russian columns, panic began to spread. Radios crackled with frantic calls, but many went unanswered. Several command vehicles had been destroyed in the opening strikes. Some units tried to push forward through the wreckage. Others attempted to turn back, only to find the road behind them blocked by burning hulks. Tanks that tried to skirt the road quickly sank into the muddy fields, becoming sitting targets. Ukrainian machine gunners raked exposed infantry, pinning them down before they could regroup. The Ukrainian artillery shifted fire toward the center of the column, creating overlapping kill zones. Entire platoons found themselves trapped in pockets of destruction with nowhere to run. Desperate Russian crews abandoned their tanks and scattered into the surrounding fields, some waving white cloths, others still clutching their rifles. Requests for air support were made, but Ukrainian air defenses were already in place. Russian aircraft stayed far out of range, leaving the trapped armor to its fate. What had started as a grand show of armored might was reduced to chaos in under 2 hours. The aftermath. As the echoes of the battle faded, the scale of destruction was staggering. The open fields were littered with blackened shells of once formidable tanks. Burnt-out APCs lay twisted and gutted, their wheels half buried in churned mud. The smell of scorched fuel hung heavy in the freezing air. Ukrainian soldiers moved cautiously through the wreckage, scanning for survivors and securing abandoned equipment. Intelligence teams photographed vehicle serial numbers, collected maps from destroyed command posts, and recovered encrypted radios for analysis. By nightfall, preliminary counts put Russian losses at over 200 armored vehicles destroyed or abandoned, including dozens of the T-90M tanks. Hundreds of Russian soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. The ground they had fought so hard to reach now stood silent, except for the occasional distant thud of Ukrainian artillery keeping other sectors in check. For Ukraine, the victory was not only tactical, but strategic. Russia's ability to mount large-scale armored offensives in this sector had been crippled. The loss of so much modern equipment in a single day was a blow that Moscow could not easily replace. Strategic implications. Analysts would later call this a masterclass in modern defensive warfare. Ukraine had taken intelligence, mobility, and precision firepower, and used them to dismantle a force far larger than their own. For Russia, the battle exposed deep flaws, rigid command structures, poor real-time communication, and overconfidence in heavy armor without adequate reconnaissance. For Ukraine, it proved that with preparation, even the largest armored force could be destroyed. The seamless integration of Western-supplied weapons, drone reconnaissance, and experienced artillery crews had turned the battlefield into a trap from which the Russian columns could not escape. Closing reflection. This was more than just a battle. It was a statement. Preparation can defeat power. Intelligence can overcome brute force. Determination can prevail even when outnumbered. For the soldiers who fought here, it was proof that courage and cunning could stop even the most fearsome armored advance. For the Russian command, it was a sobering reminder: underestimating your enemy can turn your greatest offensive into your most humiliating defeat. You've been watching Delta History, where the battlefield speaks and the truth cuts through the fog of war. If you want to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, stay with us. Subscribe, share, and join us again for the untold stories of modern warfare.